Welcome to Mother's Revenge, where heartfelt stories touch your soul and may even bring you to tears. I was standing at my father's grave on a cold November morning when I found them, fresh white roses still covered in morning dew. My family had not left them. My mom had not visited in years. The note attached had just 2 lines that would unravel everything I believed about my father's death. I am sorry I could not save you, Mr. Those initials would lead me to discover my father had been protecting me even after death through someone I never knew existed. My name is Michael Turner. I am 49 years old, and for the past 20 years I have believed a lie about the man who raised me. My father, Robert Turner, was 53 when he took his own life in his workshop on a December night in 2006. At least that is what the death certificate says. That is what the police report concluded. That is what Richard Caldwell, his business partner, told everyone who would listen. Richard Caldwell, the man who would become my stepfather just 6 months after we buried Dad. The man who took over my father's furniture company, Turner Heritage Furniture, our family home and my mother's broken heart. The man who sat at our dinner table every Thanksgiving and told me my father was weak. But those roses at the grave were not from Richard. They were not from my mother Linda, who at 68 still flinches when anyone mentions Dad's name. They were not from my sister Emily, who moved to Portland to escape the memories, or from my brother Aaron, who cut all ties with the family after Mom's remarriage. Someone else had been visiting my father's grave. Someone who signed their notes, Mr. Someone who had been coming here regularly, quietly, secretly for years. And when I found out who that someone was, when I discovered why they had been coming, everything I thought I knew about my father's death shattered like glass hitting concrete. This is the story of how a simple bouquet of flowers led me to uncover 20 years of lies, a fortune hidden in my name, and the truth about the night my father died. I grew up believing my father was a failure. That is the story Richard Caldwell made sure everyone remembered. Richard, my father's business partner who married my mother just 6 months after Dad took his own life in 2006. For years I lived with Richard's version of events. Your father was weak, Michael, he would say at family dinners, cutting into his steak while sitting in what used to be Dad's chair. Could not handle the pressure of business. Some men just are not built for success. He would look at me when he said it like he was warning me about some genetic defect I might have inherited. My father, Robert Turner, had built Turner Heritage Furniture from nothing. Started in our garage when I was 5, watching him sand oak boards until his hands bled. I remember the sawdust in his hair, the way he would measure twice and cut once, the pride in his eyes when he would run his palm across a perfectly smooth surface. Feel that, Michael, he would say, guiding my small hand across the wood. That is what honest work feels like. By the time I was in high school, he employed 45 people, not just workers, but craftsmen. He had trained himself. Samuel Brooks was his first hire back in 1988. A young man who Dad taught to see the grain in wood like it was telling a story. There was Carlos Medina, who could carve roses so real you would expect them to smell sweet, and Harold Simmons, whose hands could turn walnut into works of art that sold for thousands. Dad knew every employee's spouse's name, their kids' birthdays, their struggles and dreams. When Carlos' son needed surgery, Dad paid for it out of his own pocket. When Harold's wife got cancer, Dad made sure Harold could work from home, bringing pieces to him so he could stay close to her. The workshop smelled like cedar and varnished creativity and hard work. Dad had this old radio that only picked up one classic rock station, and he would sing along to Boston and Kansas while teaching me the difference between oak and ash, between cheap veneer and solid wood. Never cut corners on quality, Michael, he would tell me. Your name goes on everything you make. Make sure it is worth something. The business partnership with Richard started in 2003. Dad needed capital to expand into the old Founders Plaza building downtown, wanted to create what he called furniture that tells stories. Richard had deep pockets from his previous ventures. all of them involving buying distressed companies and restructuring them. Mom had her doubts. I remember that. "Robert, he is not like you," she had said one night when she did not know I was listening. "He sees numbers, not people." But Dad believed in second chances and seeing the good in people. Everyone deserves an opportunity to build something meaningful. "Linda," he had replied, "maybe working with real craftsmen will change his perspective." Within 2 years, Dad was dead, found hanging in the workshop where he had built his dreams. The company was immediately restructured under Richard's control. The craftsmen were replaced by machines and cheap imports. The founder's plaza building became a showroom for mass-produced furniture that Dad would have called soulless garbage dressed in fancy prices. My mother, grief-stricken and lost, married Richard 6 months later. I was 29, then trying to understand how she could move on so quickly. "He is taking care of everything, Michael," she had said, her eyes hollow. "The business, the debts, the house. Your father left such a mess. Richard is fixing it all." But what mess? Dad kept meticulous records. His books were always balanced. His bills always paid on time. He used to show me the ledgers, teaching me that financial responsibility was just as important as craftsmanship. "A man who does not pay his debts on time is stealing someone else's sleep," he would say. The last time I saw my father alive was December 10th, 2006. He had asked me to come by the workshop, said he needed to talk to me about something important. But I was busy with my own life, a girlfriend who demanded attention, a job that seemed more important than it was. "Can it wait until the weekend, Dad?" I had asked. "Sure, son," he had said, and I remember now how tired his voice sounded. "The weekend is fine." He died that Thursday night, December 14th, 2006. The police said he had been drinking, though Dad rarely touched alcohol. They said he had left a note, though no one in the family ever saw it. Richard handled everything: the funeral, the estate, the transition of the business. Within 6 months, it was like Robert Turner had never existed, except as a cautionary tale. Richard liked to tell about the dangers of being too soft for the business world. I had not been back to Willow Ridge Cemetery in 3 years. But that morning, November 15th, would have been Dad's 73rd birthday. Something pulled me there. Maybe guilt. Maybe just the need to tell him I had finally gotten my own business off the ground. I never expected to find those roses. The roses were expensive, not grocery store flowers, but the kind from high-end florists. 14 of them perfectly arranged with that note tucked between the stems. The paper was quality, too. Cream-colored cardstock that had not yellowed despite the morning dew. I turned the card over and over in my cold fingers. The handwriting was shaky but deliberate, like someone had taken great care with each letter despite trembling hands. In 20 years since Dad's death, I had never seen flowers here that were not from immediate family. My younger sister Emily lived in Portland, now working as a nurse. She had not been back in 5 years. Not since that Christmas dinner where Richard spent 2 hours explaining why Dad's business model had been fundamentally flawed. My older brother Aaron cut ties with everyone after Mom remarried. He had stood up at their wedding reception, looked Richard straight in the eye and said, "You are not half the man my father was." Then he walked out and never came back. That evening I could not focus on anything. I sat in my home office, supposedly working on inventory for my small electronics repair shop, but all I could see were those roses. Who was Mr.? Why apologize to a dead man? What was there to be sorry about? I called Mom, trying to sound casual. "Hey, did you visit Dad's grave recently?" There was a pause. I heard her set down something metal, probably a pot. "Why would I do that?" Her voice was sharp, defensive, the way it always got when Dad came up in conversation. "Just wondering. Someone left flowers. Probably the cemetery. They do that sometimes for veterans, but Dad was not a veteran. Mom knew that." I heard Richard in the background asking who was calling. "It is Michael," she said away from the phone. Then back to me. I have to go. Richard's dinner is ready. She hung up quickly the way she always did when Dad came up. 20 years, and she still could not have a normal conversation about the man she had been married to for 23 years. The next morning, I called Willow Ridge Cemetery office. Do you guys leave flowers on graves as part of maintenance or special occasions? No, sir, the woman replied. We only maintain the grounds. Any decorations come from visitors. I went back to the grave that afternoon. The roses were still there, though starting to wilt at the edges. I studied the surrounding graves looking for similar bouquets, but found none. This was not some good Samaritan leaving flowers on forgotten graves. This was specific, personal, targeted. The following Tuesday, I went back. New roses, same spot, same type, white long-stemmed, wrapped in dark green paper from Eden Bloom Florist, the expensive place on Hamilton Street. No note this time, but the pattern was clear. Someone had been doing this regularly. I started visiting every few days, altering my schedule, hoping to catch this mysterious mourner. Early mornings before work lunch breaks, late evenings when the cemetery gates stayed open until 9:30. Nothing. But the roses kept appearing, always fresh, always white, always placed with precision at the center of the headstone. I asked the groundskeeper, Miguel, if he had seen anyone. There is an old man. Sometimes, Miguel said, leaning on his rake. Early mornings, usually Tuesdays, walks with a limp never stays long. What does he look like? Hard to say. Always wears a dark coat hat pulled low. Respectful, though never leaves a mess. Never disturbs other graves. Then I did something I am not proud of. I went to a hunting supplies store and bought a small wildlife camera, the kind hunters use to track deer movement. That night I snuck back to the cemetery and mounted it on the oak tree overlooking Dad's grave. The camera was motion-activated, infrared, capable invisible unless you knew where to look. 3 days later, I retrieved the memory card. Most of the footage was nothing. Birds a stray cat, leaves blowing across the frame. But at 5:47 a.m. on Tuesday there he was, a figure in a dark coat, walking slowly, favoring his left leg. He approached the grave with careful steps, removed his hat despite the cold, and stood there for a full 3 minutes before placing the roses. The way he stood there, head bowed, hands clasped in front of him. This was not casual respect. This was grief, raw and sustained. This was someone carrying a weight that had not lightened with time. He reached out, once touched the headstone with his fingertips, then pulled back like it burned. When he turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of his profile. Elderly, maybe 70s, deep lines etched into his face. He walked like someone who had been carrying something heavy for so long that his body had permanently bent under its weight. I knew then that Mr. Whoever he was held answers to questions I had not even thought to ask. This was not just about flowers on a grave. This was about something that had been buried along with my father. Something that someone could not let rest in peace. I made a decision that my father would have called reckless. I hired Frank Dalton, a private investigator who worked out of a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax office. His advertisement in the yellow pages was simple. Discretion results. Reasonable rates, $100 a day, plus expenses. When I walked into his office, I found a man in his 60s with gray stubble and coffee stains on his shirt, surrounded by filing cabinets that looked older than me. You want me to identify someone from cemetery footage? Frank said not a question, but a statement as he reviewed the USB drive I had given him. He squinted at the grainy image on his ancient desktop computer. Based on initials, Mr., and the fact that he has been leaving flowers for 20 years. Can you do it? Frank leaned back in his chair, which squeaked in protest. I was a cop for 32 years before this. Found people who did not want to be found. This guy does not seem to be hiding, just grieving. Those are easier. He pulled out a yellow legal pad and a pen that looked like it had been chewed on. Tell me about your father. I spent the next hour telling Frank everything. Dad's business is suicide, Richard taking over marrying Mom. Frank took notes without interrupting, occasionally nodding or grunting. When I finished, he set down his pen. "You think there is more to your father's death," Frank said. "I know my father. He was not weak. He was not a quitter, and he would never leave his family without an explanation. The police said there was a note. That is what Richard told us. None of the family ever saw it." Frank studied me for a long moment. "This could open doors you cannot close, Michael. Your mother is remarried. Your family has moved on, mostly. Sometimes the truth is not worth the pain it causes. My father taught me that a man's reputation is all he really leaves behind. His has been destroyed. If there is more to this story, I need to know." Frank nodded slowly. "Give me everything you have. Business records, photos, anything from that time period. And I mean everything, even if it seems unimportant." I went home and pulled out the boxes I had saved from Dad's things. Mom had wanted to throw everything away. Said it was too painful, but I had rescued what I could. Business cards, receipts, photographs from company picnics, even his old appointment calendar from 2006. The last entry, December 13th. The day before he died, simply said, "Mr. 7 p.m. Important. Mr. The same initials. I called my brother Aaron. We had not spoken in 2 years, but he answered on the third ring. "Michael." His voice was cautious. "What is wrong?" "Someone has been leaving flowers on Dad's grave." Notes signed, Mr. Did he ever mention anyone with those initials? Long silence. I could hear him breathing, processing. "Why are you digging into this?" "Because someone who signs their notes, Mr. has been visiting Dad's grave for 20 years because they left a note saying they were sorry they could not save him." "Michael, some stones are better left unturned. You know something?" Another pause. "I know Richard is dangerous. I know Mom made her choice. And I know Dad would not want you getting hurt." "What do you mean dangerous?" "I mean that 2 other business partners of Richard's had accidents before Dad. One had a heart attack at 42. Another drove his car off a bridge. Both times Richard ended up with their companies." My blood went cold. "Why did you never say anything? With what proof coincidences are not evidence? And Mom was already married to him. What was I supposed to do? Tell her she married a killer?" After Aaron hung up, I sat in my dark living room processing what he had said. I thought about calling the whole thing off. Letting sleeping dogs lie, as Dad would have said. But then I remembered something else Dad used to say. "The truth is like water, Michael. It always finds a way through, no matter how many walls you build." I brought everything to Frank the next morning. 3 boxes of documents, photos, calendars. He spread them across his desk like puzzle pieces, occasionally making notes or setting certain items aside. "Your father was meticulous," Frank observed, studying the appointment calendar. "Everything documented, everything in its place. This was not a man falling apart. That is what I have been trying to tell people for years." Frank held up the calendar entry from December 13th. "Mr. 7 p.m. Important. This was the night before he died. If we find Mr., we might find out what that meeting was about." "How long will it take?" "Give me 2 days, maybe less, if Mr. is local and still alive." Frank looked up at me. "Are you prepared for whatever I might find?" I thought about Richard sitting in my father's chair using my father's tools to carve up his company. Sleeping in my father's bed with my father's wife. I have been living with not knowing for 20 years. Whatever the truth is, it is better than this. Frank stood and shook my hand. His grip was firm, steady. "I will call you the moment I have something. Until then, act normal. Do not confront Richard. Do not ask your mother questions. If your brother is right about Richard being dangerous, we do not want to spook him." Frank called at 6:00 a.m. on the second day. His voice was different, shaky, urgent, nothing like the calm professional I had met in his office. Michael, you need to come to my office now. Do not tell anyone where you are going. What did you find? Not over the phone. Just get here. The 20-minute drive felt like hours. When I arrived, Frank had papers spread across his entire desk, spilling onto the floor. Bank statements, legal documents, photographs. His coffee maker was still brewing its third pot based on the empty cups scattered around. His hands trembled slightly as he poured me a cup I did not want. Mr. is Samuel Brooks. Robert often referred to Samuel in his notes as Mr. Short for Master Restorer, because Samuel was the finest finishing specialist in the workshop. Frank began pointing to a driver's license photo of an elderly black man with kind eyes. He was your father's first employee back in 1988. Worked as a finishing specialist until November 2004, a year before Dad died. Why did he leave? He did not leave. Richard fired him. 2 weeks after becoming partner, Richard dismissed him for inefficiency. Your father fought it, but Richard had majority control by then. Frank pulled out an employment record. Samuel had worked there 17 years, never missed a day. Your father wrote him a recommendation letter that called him the finest craftsman and most honest man I have ever worked with. Frank pulled out a bank statement. But here is where it gets interesting. Samuel has been depositing money into a trust account every month since December 2006, 1 month after your father's death. My throat went dry. What kind of account? It is in your name, Michael. Set up through a small credit union across town. The current balance is $420,000. With accumulated interest over 2 decades, the balance had grown to $420,000. The room spun. I had to sit down. That is impossible. How could there be an account in my name? I do not know about trust accounts for a beneficiary, do not require the beneficiary's knowledge or signature, just their social security number and basic information. Samuel has been depositing $100 to $600 every month for 20 years without fail. $600 a month. Where would Samuel get that kind of money? Frank pulled out another document. He sold his house in 2006, moved into a 1-bedroom apartment, had been living on Social Security, and a part-time job at a hardware store. Every extra penny goes into that account. But why? Why would he do that? That is where this gets darker. Frank pulled out a photocopy of a letter. The paper yellowed with age. This was in your father's effects at the police station. It was logged as evidence but never properly investigated. It is from Samuel to your father, dated December 7th, 2006, a week before his death. I took the letter with shaking hands and read, Robert, I have gathered the proof you asked for. Richard has been siphoning money through 3 shell companies, Caldwell Holdings, Summit Ridge Ventures, and Sterling Crest Consulting. I have copies of the falsified invoices, the dummy transactions, everything. He has stolen close to $900,000 over 2 years. I know you are planning to confront him, but please wait. Let me get this to the authorities first. We can stop him the right way. Do not meet with him alone. Please, your friend Samuel. Dad knew, I whispered. He knew Richard was stealing. There is more, Frank said, pulling out a police report. Your father's death was ruled a suicide, but look at the autopsy report. Bruising on his wrists consistent with restraints. A bump on his head that happened before death. The medical examiner noted it, but did not pursue it because there was a suicide note. The note no one in my family ever saw. Right. And guess who identified the body and handled all the arrangements, Richard? Frank nodded. I found Samuel. He is in Golden Hills Nursing Center across town. Prostate cancer stage 4. He has been paying for those flowers from his Social Security checks. That afternoon I sat beside Samuel Brooks's bed. He was thin, fragile tubes running into his arms, but his eyes were sharp when he saw me. You look just like Robert, he whispered, tears already forming. Same eyes, same stubborn jaw. The story poured out of him like a confession he had been rehearsing for 20 years. Richard had been embezzling from the company, setting up the books. to make it look like Dad was responsible. When Samuel discovered it during a routine inventory check, he had gone straight to Dad. "Your father wanted to handle it quietly, give Richard a chance to make it right." That was Robert always believing people could be better, but Richard knew we were on to him. "The night your father died, December 14th, he had called me, said Richard had threatened him, said he had evidence that would send Robert to prison instead." What happened that night? Samuel closed his eyes. I was supposed to meet them both at the workshop, bring all the evidence. But that afternoon, Richard came to my house, had photos of my daughter at her school, my grandkids at the playground. Said accidents happen all the time. Said if I showed up that night or ever spoke about what I knew, my family would pay the price. His voice broke completely. "I chose my family over your father. I stayed home like a coward while Robert faced that monster alone. Next morning, the news said he had killed himself. But I know Robert did not write that note. I know he did not tie that noose. The money in the account, Robert's life insurance, would not pay out for suicide. Your mother got nothing initially. I knew Richard would take everything else. So I have been saving for you for when you were ready to know the truth. Every dollar is my apology for letting your father down." Samuel pulled a safety deposit key from under his pillow. "Everything is in there. Every document, every proof. Your father was the most honest man I ever knew. He deserves justice, even if it is too late for him to see it." I took Samuel's evidence to a lawyer, then to the FBI. Financial crimes do not have a statute of limitations when they involve ongoing fraud. The safety deposit box contained everything. Falsified invoices, bank records, recordings Samuel had made of Richard discussing the embezzlement with someone on the phone. Richard had been using the same tactics with other businesses for years, leaving a trail of destroyed companies and dead partners behind him. The investigation took 7 months. Federal agents showed up at Caldwell Industries on a Tuesday morning, walking out with boxes of computers and filing cabinets. Richard was arrested at his country club that afternoon, pulled off the golf course in handcuffs while his business associates watched. The same club where he had successfully petitioned to have my father's name removed from the memorial wall because suicide victims did not deserve to be honored alongside real entrepreneurs. Mom called me that night hysterical. "What have you done? Richard says you are spreading lies about him." I drove to her house, my childhood home that Richard had renovated until nothing remained of my father's touch. She was in the kitchen, the one room that still looked the same. I laid out everything on the table where we used to eat Dad's pancakes on Sunday mornings. The documents, the photos, Samuel's testimony, the FBI's initial findings. She read in silence for an hour. Then she looked up at me, and I saw something break in her eyes. "I married him," she whispered. "I married the man who killed Robert. I slept beside him for 20 years. You did not know, Mom, but I should have. Robert was not weak. He was not a quitter. I knew that, and I let Richard convince me otherwise because it was easier than asking questions." The trial made national news. Black Widow businessman, the Richard Caldwell story. 3 other families came forward with similar stories. Business partners who died under suspicious circumstances, their companies absorbed by Richard's empire. The FBI found evidence linking him to at least 5 deaths over 20 years. Samuel testified from his hospital bed, the court making special arrangements for video testimony. His voice was weak, but his words were clear as he told the jury about that December night, about the threats, about 20 years of guilt. "I failed Robert Turner," he said, "but I will not fail him again. Not when I can finally tell the truth. Richard got life without parole. 3 counts of murder, multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and racketeering. When they read the verdict, he looked at me across the courtroom with those cold eyes and mouthed, 'Your father was still weak.' But Richard was wrong. My father's strength was in the lives he had touched, the people he had helped, the integrity he had maintained even when facing a monster. Every one of Dad's former employees showed up for the trial. Carlos Medina, now running his own workshop, testified about Dad's generosity. Harold Simmons, retired but still creating, talked about Dad's dedication to craft and people. Samuel lived 2 more weeks after the verdict. I spent every day at his bedside, and on his last coherent day, I brought him to Dad's grave one final time. He was in a wheelchair, barely able to lift his head, but he insisted on placing the roses himself. "I am not asking for forgiveness," Samuel said to the headstone. "I am just telling you that your boy knows the truth now. You were not weak, Robert. You were the strongest man I knew, carrying all that weight alone to protect everyone else." Samuel died the next morning. I used part of the money he had saved to give him the funeral he deserved, burying him 3 plots down from my father. The rest of the money went to establishing the Robert Turner Foundation, providing mental health support and legal resources for small business owners facing financial crisis or predatory partners. Mom sold the house and moved to a small apartment near Emily in Portland. She testified against Richard in the civil trials, helping other families recover what he had stolen. "It is the least I can do," she told me. "I cannot bring Robert back, but I can help restore his reputation." Aaron came home for the first time in years. We stood together at Dad's grave, finally able to mourn the man we had actually lost, not the fiction Richard had created. "He protected us all," Aaron said. "Even in death, he protected us." Standing at Dad's grave today, I do not bring white roses like Samuel did. I bring yellow ones for friendship, for the bond between a father and son that even death could not break. The note I leave is simple. The truth survived Dad. Your good name is restored. Your son remembers who you really were. Samuel taught me that guilt can either destroy you or drive you to make things right. My father taught me that strength is not about never falling. It is about what you protect, even as you fall. Richard taught me that evil can wear a respectable face and speak in boardroom language, but truth, like water, always finds its way through. Sometimes justice comes late. Sometimes it comes through unexpected people. A dying old man with cancer and a heart full of regret. But when it finally arrives, it reminds us that truth and love never really die. They wait patient and persistent for someone brave enough to uncover them. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in the power of truth and justice no matter how long they take to arrive, please share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment about a time when the truth came to light in your own life. And do not forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of redemption, truth, and the unbreakable bonds that connect us even after.